Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will have to balance the growing spending needs of the country with weaker revenue streams when he presents his medium-term budget policy statement later today. But for more on what to expect and just, trying to help us understand some of the intricacies around this matter, we are now crossing over to our Economics Editor Tshepo Mongoai, who is, of course, in Cape Town. Tshepo, interesting, just listening to you earlier on, and of course, there's a lot in terms of that balancing act and where the fat needs to be trimmed, so to speak. But of course, you, the guru here, so do tell us more.
No, absolutely. A lot of balancing act. We know that the tax picture is not looking very good. The hardest hit being the corporate income tax. We've seen that declining substantially around 12%. VAT around 5% increase, and of course it's just enough to cushion us against inflation. What we have seen is that personal income tax, we've seen some nice increase in terms of personal income tax, largely because we've seen that 7.5% wage increase in the public sector. But that also is a main culprit in terms of pushing up expenditure, government expenditure, resulting in a serious growth in expenditure around 9%. So it is a bit of a concern in terms of how will government be able to sustain some of the projects. Of course, some of the projects are very, very important, as playing a big role to empower many of our young people in the country, giving them experience in the workplace. We've seen many of the young people at schools serving as teacher assistants and supporting various schools in those programs so that they gain real good experience. Just to bring that into context, we are now joined by the UCT SRC President Hlamulo Khorommbi, just to talk to us about issues that really affect the young people, especially at higher learning of institutions. Hlamulo, thank you very much for joining us. As students, are you really taking a lot of keen interest in this budget? The minister last week said that we do not have money and we need to do something. Does this message resonate with you?
Thank you for having me here. But I think the main issue which everybody in a higher institution can be able to see is the issue of funding. Funding has been the main issue, not only at UCT, but at the higher institution in general in South Africa.
What are some of the things that perhaps you like to see the Minister of Finance attending to? We know that funding is a major issue. There's a lot of poverty and hunger by students at high institutions.
I think my expectation today, I would like the Minister to touch on maybe an increase in the budget in terms of funding. If we look at NSFAS last year, they end up introducing something called a resident cap, where they say Bona pay only 45,000, which they pay per year, which is unreasonable. Their resident which per year they cost close to 78,000, which is the minimum resident which a student can get and have a decent place to stay. So I think those are the things which we're expecting a minister to touch on if he's really saving to empower us as youth. Because once you start putting such things, you are putting barriers in terms of us receiving education, which now education will be only received by those who can afford. So I think that's something which I'm expecting from a minister to touch in terms of funding. How are they thinking of making sure we have a stable funding, we are able to assist all students are able to receive education freely without being subjected of being poor or coming from a good background.
Well, we know the issue of the missing middle and the fact that the funding criteria for students has been tightened. There are students who are going to fall outside that band. How are you dealing with that?
That's a very big issue. It's an headache to many student leaders and the institutions in general, because we are against the issue of a threshold of 350,000, which misses the middle class. There are parents who indeed they earn maybe more than 350,000, but if you check how fees are expensive, they can't afford. It means you are closing them outside. Don't say it's going to happen that many students fall outside. It have already started. There are many students which in current year they've been defunded, and we are seeing again, that even next year, if there is nothing which is going to be done about this, we are going to see a quite number of students which are going to be defunded. In that manner, it means we are going to increase the stats of number of financial exclusion in higher institutions.
Let's talk about the issue of work experience skills. There are a lot of internship programs. Students are placed in companies, and there's some programs that government came up with to give people, young people skills. Is this working?
I think we must be realistic with ourselves. In majority of time, if we've evaluated, internship are just made just for publicity. Because majority of those graduates who go to have those internships, they tend to become a coffee boys for the bosses. They become those who are being sent to buy lunches during lunch, which we are calling out to the stakeholders, to the government, to companies. Instead of you making internships after the degree, why don't you be involved when the student is still in undergrad and take them to a workplace and make them to be able to inquire some skills? Because majority of student jobs which you talk about nightclubs, being a barman. That's the only jobs which you can talk of when you are still in a university if you are looking for casual jobs. So we are calling them that in those times of VEC, in those times June, December, why can't they have some sort of programs which they are taking students who are still in undergrad and give them an experience so that they can gain some skills? Because in terms of internship, we have witnessed it. In majority of internship, there is nothing much which they acquire. Some they can go for internships and come back without even having a basic skills.
Thank you very much, Hlamulo Khorommbi. He is the newly elected president of SRC at the UCT, of course, raising the issue around training and skilling of young people, that many of them are not really empowered in those various companies and government departments where they are doing their internship.